What's up, it's Cairo. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at the Brothers War, the upcoming set for Magic the Gathering and Magic the Gathering Arena. I'm rating cards for Standard today. I will be mentioning Limited a little bit here and there, but I know Standard the best, so we're going to be focusing basically on that format today. So if you liked the video, please hit that thumbs up button. Helps me to bring more content, and consider subscribing for more spoilers and gameplay. Here we go. First card, Arms Race. 1 red, 3 generic for an enchantment. Tap 1 red, 3 generic, put an artifact from your hand onto the battlefield. That artifact gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Best case scenario here, you put in a big 7 or 8 drop artifact creature onto the battlefield. It gets to attack because it has haste, but realistically, you are actually still paying 8 mana to do this over the course of 2 turns or so, and sometimes sacrificing your entire turn 4 to cast this is going to feel really bad in the hopes that you get to do this multiple times later, and especially if it's destroyed, you just lose your whole turn 4. I think it's too slow. It doesn't impact the board immediately, so I don't think it's going to be seeing play in competitive Standard. Next up is Bitter Reunion. Common enchantment for 1 red, 1 generic. When it enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Tap 1, sacrifice it, and give all your creatures haste. This could be like a cute combo to put out early if you have something that generates a bunch of creature tokens in 1 turn and be able to give them all haste, in turn 4 or 5 or something. But this is kind of a fringe sort of fun experimental card. I don't think it's going to see much play. If you're trying to be aggressive and you're trying to go wide or have a lot of creatures that give them haste, turn 2 is very important for you. You're going to be wanting to play a creature, preferably one with haste on turn 2, rather than just have a good 2-drop creature. I'm also not sure that you want to play this on turn 2 and then have one big creature later that you give it haste. I'm not sure if that matters. So Bitter Reunion, I'm going to say probably doesn't see much play, but it could. Conscripted Infantry. 1 red, 2 generic for a human soldier. When it dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Probably decent to good and limited. Nice aggressive 2-drop that leaves something behind when it dies. Probably not good enough for Standard play. Next is Draconic Destiny. 2 red, 1 generic for an aura that gives +1/+1 flying, haste, and fire breathing. Then, when the creature dies, Draconic Destiny comes back into your hand. Now, keep in mind this is only if it dies. It's not if it gets exiled or bounced. This is a very good card that will see play somewhere, even if your deck only wants maybe 1 or 2 of these. Probably not going to run 4. This is a great card that can just continually be recast on bigger and bigger things. And that flying really matters. The pump matters. The haste matters. It grants great stats in red boost aggro, and mid-range will also love this card. Next up is Dwarven Forge Chanter. 1 red, 1 generic for a 1/3 dwarf wizard with ward, pay 2 life, and prowess. I like seeing prowess and ward together. I just wish this was a 2/2 instead of a 1/3. It would be a little bit more aggressive and take advantage of that prowess a little bit more. This will most likely be a sweet common and limited, but I think probably will not see play in Standard except for in maybe some lower tier spells matter decks. This card does look fun though, and I am going to try it for sure. Next we have Excavation Explosion. 1 red, 2 generic for a sorcery. 3 damage to any target and create a tapped Power Stone token. We do have Lightning Strike in Standard for 1 cheaper mana and without the Power Stone. I think that's pretty much enough said here. This is going to be removal for your limited decks. A good red removal there, but I don't think this is going to be seeing Standard play. Next up, the Fall of Krug. 2 red, 4 generic for a sorcery. Choose target opponent. Destroy target land that opponent controls. The Fall of Krug deals 3 damage to that player and 1 damage to each creature they control. Ultimately, I think this is going to be too expensive. This costs 6 for all these effects bundled. The 1 damage to the creature isn't likely to matter on turn 5 or 6, even if you ramp into this a little bit. The land destruction is cool, but not for 6 mana. This strikes me, this wants to be kind of 3 different effects or 3 different cards that you would cost for cheaper mana value, that you don't really want them at the same time. You want the 1 damage on turn 2 or 3 to get rid of little tokens and cheap creatures, and you also want the land destruction before turn 6. I think it's just way too expensive and unlikely to see Standard play. Next is Phylagi Chain Dancer. 1 red, 3 generic for a human soldier at common, 2/4 creature. With tap 2 generic mana, it gains double strike until end of turn. Probably fine for limited, too expensive for Standard, and the effect costs too much. Next up, we have Feldon Ronom Excavator. 1 red, 1 generic for a legendary creature, Human Artificer, 2/2 with haste. He cannot block, and when he's dealt damage, exile that many cards from the top of your library, choose one, and until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. This card seems really good in aggressive decks. You basically just play Feldon and you start smashing. If they block you, you get to exile cards from the top of your library and play one, and that sticks around until the end of your turn. It also depends on how much damage Feldon takes. So, say Feldon becomes a 3/3 or 4/4. They're not incentivized at all to block with a 2/2, a 1/1, or 3/3. Because if he doesn't die when he takes that damage, that exile effect keeps happening, and you get to keep choosing cards. So this is a very solid investment for a 2-drop. Feldon is going to see play, if not by anybody else, by me for sure. It's quite good, and I think is going to see play in the meta one way or the other, especially in aggressive decks. Next is Giant Cindermaw. 1 red, 2 generic for a dinosaur beast. 4/3 trample. Players can't gain life. This is pretty good uncommon for 3 mana. This can smash pretty hard. I like that it does have trample. The 3 toughness gets blown out by basically any removal spell in the format other than cut down. But bonus points for this if life gain becomes a big deck in the new standard, although the chances of that are pretty unlikely. I haven't seen much life gain stuff being added to standard. But this card is pretty good for uncommon and a pretty good limited card. It could see play in mono red decks in standard. It's probably not likely, but it could be there. Next we have Goblin Blast-Runner. 1 red for a 1/2 Goblin. Goblin Blast-Runner gets +2/+0 and has menace as long as you've sacrificed a permanent this turn. This works great with treasure tokens. This is going to work great with lands that come in to be sacrificed to grab a basic like the Cycle from New Capenna, and also works pretty well in Rakdos Sacrifice. Goblin Blast-Runner is a pretty good common and may see play in decks that are sacrificing things every single turn. Having a 3/2 menace that can attack every turn when you want to be sacrificing things anyway, pretty good. Could see some play in Oni Cult Anvil decks. Here we have Horned Stone Seeker. 1 red, 1 generic for a 2/2 lizard with menace that creates a Power Stone token when it enters and makes you sacrifice 1 when it leaves. This is a good uncommon. Odds are you're going to be able to utilize that Power Stone token before this is killed, so even if it's just a temporary thing, that's fine. Could see play in the Onicult Anvil deck, again, generating an artifact for them to sacrifice, and ramping if they do have other artifacts to play, or decks that care about when artifacts enter or leave the battlefield. So I like Horned Stoneseeker a lot, actually. Next card we have is Mechanized Warfare. 2 red, 1 generic for an enchantment that says if a red or artifact source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent that opponent controls, it deals that much +1 instead. This pumps up your red removal spells, it pumps up your burn, makes your red creatures hit harder, makes your artifact creatures hit harder. This should see play. This is going to be great in aggressive decks that already have 2 or 3 creatures on the field. When this comes down, your opponent thinks they're safe, that they can block favorably. This comes down and then throws that all upside down. I think that Mechanized Warfare is going to see a pretty good chance of seeing play. It puts a lot of pressure on the opponent. I'm excited to play this. Next is Mishra Excavation Prodigy. 1 red, 2 generic for a legendary human artificer. 2/1 with haste that you can tap 1 and tap it to draw a card, discard a card. Whenever you discard 1 or more artifacts, it adds 2 red mana to your pool. Granted, you do have to pay 1 to discard using Mishra's ability, but this paired with something like Fable the Mirror Breaker that's going to let you discard artifacts via another trigger so you don't have to spend mana to do that, should be pretty powerful, and be able to generate mana like this should give you what you need to cast a big hasty threat. Not to mention if you discard artifacts with Unearth, they can come back giving you synergy there. This version of Mishra should see play and should be good, most likely in red-black. Next is Mishra's Command. 1 red, X. Choose 2. Target player may discard up to X cards, then they draw a card for each card discarded this way. This spell does X damage to target creature. This spell does X damage to target planeswalker, or target creature gets +X/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. So the first mode has a may clause, so you cannot force your opponent to discard and draw cards with this, so this seems like it always pretty much targets you. If you can utilize the graveyard, this isn't bad, or if you have effects that occur every time you draw or discard a card, this can stack up quickly, say like Sheoldred in red-black. Dealing X damage to a creature and a planeswalker at the same time will feel nice when you're able to do it. And the last mode gives a creature haste and you're going to be trying to tap as much mana as you can for this spell, which doesn't leave much room to both cast this and cast a big creature and give it haste. But you could tap basically 1 red mana for this, or 2 or something like that, and give a creature haste for cheap if all you need is the haste. I think best case scenario is this haste and this pump ability is going to be used on a cheap creature, so you can use its activated ability right away, or an already existing creature just for the +X+0. This card could see some play. I wasn't too high on it when I first saw it, but the more I look at it, the more I like it, and I think I'm going to try it when the Brothers War comes out. Next is Mishra's Domination. 1 red, 1 generic for an enchantment aura. As long as you control enchanted creature, it gets +2/+2. Otherwise, it can't block. This is a nice little common aura that has multiple uses. If you're already ahead on board, you can get rid of the opponent's biggest blocker for 2, or if they don't have anything to block, you can just push through extra damage. It is a permanent +2/+2, but keep in mind it's much easier for the opponent to just blow out your creature when you spend mana for the aura with instant speed removal on their end. So this card is very high risk, high reward, high power. This is red and red's flavor. I think it's going to be nice and limited where removal is more scarce and the chance of a blowout is less likely, but could see fringe play in standard, probably not going to be tier 1. Mishra's Onslaught. 1 red, 3 generic for an instant. Choose 1. Create 2 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, or creatures you control get +2/+0 till end of turn. We saw a similar card in the Adventures of the Forgotten Realms set in You See a Pair of Goblins, and it was played to pretty good success in the standard Goblins deck, though it was never tier 1. If we see Soldier, Tribal, and Red operate at the same level, I would expect this sees play in a go-wide Soldier deck. This is a pretty good common. It can generate some chump blockers for you if you need it to, given that it's instant. You can generate them on your opponent's turn, and then they're ready to attack on your next turn. This is a good common. I think it'll see some play. Next is Monastery Swiftspear. If you've been checking out these spoilers or following them, you know people are excited about this, and I am one of them. It's 1 red for a 1/2 haste with prowess. Yes, this will see play. This is a reprint, and it's going to be a major player in red and Izzet decks for pretty much as long as it remains in standard. This is an exciting reprint, and could see a lot of play in a new Izzet deck featuring Delver of Secrets or Red Burn. Good card, guaranteed to see play in competitive standard. Maybe not tier 1, but this card is a solid pickup and a great craft at uncommon if you are playing on MTG Arena. Next is Obliterating Bolt. 1 red, 1 generic for a sorcery, speed, burn spell to a creature or planeswalker. If that creature would die, it gets exiled instead. Sorcery speed removal has to do about 4 damage for 2 mana, and this hits that requirement. The exile is also very nice. This should see some play. We don't have a lot of red-based removal that can do 4 or more damage right now. Even at sorcery speed, I think that investment is worth it. Maybe you don't run 4 of these in your deck. Maybe 2 or maybe even 3 I think is feasible and should see play. Next we have Over the Top. 2 red, 5 generic for a total of 7 mana for this sorcery. Each player reveals a number of cards from the top of their library equal to the number of non-land permanents they control. Puts all permanent cards revealed this way onto the battlefield, and the rest into their graveyard. I'm not sure what deck really wants a card like this, given that it's so expensive, but also rewards you for having more non-land permanents than your opponent. So I guess maybe a token deck here, where you have a lot of 1/1 tokens, a lot of treasure tokens, a lot of power stones. Basically, the more things you have on the board, the more stuff that you can grab. It could see play, but it basically requires you to build your deck around it, so it's a little bit questionable since your opponent gets to do it too. I think maybe you play this after a board wipe. You clear the board, and then you have your tokens left over, artifact, treasure tokens, whatever, and then you go grab your big beasts. Say, you cast this, you grab 3 or 4 things. Strikes me maybe as more of a commander card, because it could be very fun in that format, but seems like it's worth a try, seems like a fun card. Pendragon Strongbull. 1 red, 2 generic for a Minotaur. 2/3 power and toughness. It has spend 1 generic mana, sacrifice an artifact. It gets +1/+1 till end of turn, and deals 1 damage to each opponent. This can see played in an Oni Cult Anvil sacrifice deck, where you have a lot of little 1/1s to sacrifice, but I'm just not sure it's strong enough to make the cut. There are a lot of good decks coming out cards coming out that can go in that deck, and I'm not sure that this is the 3-drop that you want. But seems like a fun little card if you have a lot of artifacts. Tapping 5 mana, sacking 5 of them, and making this thing big and dealing 5 damage to your opponent seems pretty cool. A little bit far-fetched though. I don't think Pendragon's Strongbow is quite there. Next is Pyrrhic Blast. 1 red, 3 generic for an instant. As an additional cost, sacrifice a creature. Pyrrhic Blast deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target, and draw a card. This is a neat little card. Pairs well with threaten effects that steal an opponent's creature for a turn. The fact that it's instant means you can attack with your creatures if the opponent blocks in like an unfavorable way. You can sack a creature that lived and burn their face directly to win, or you can sacrifice another creature, say that wasn't in combat, to help you win combats. There's a lot of versatility here. You can burn down one of their big creatures. I like this card. I see this as a potential finisher for red decks, and maybe even is it sacrificing in like an 8/4 Haughty Djinn for the victory after you swing with it. Seems really, really fun. This could see play for sure. Next up is Raise to the Ground. 1 red, 2 generic for sorcery. This spell can't be countered. Destroy target artifact. If its mana value was 1 or less, draw a card. This card is way too narrow. It's at sorcery speed. Using it to destroy a 1 mana artifact or power stone token or something like that is laughable. Not a good card. We have better cards that cost less and are more versatile, like Abrade at instant speed for 2 mana. I really, really doubt this sees play in Standard. The draw a card, can't be countered, I don't think really makes this worth the mana cost. Next is Rock Hunter. 1 red, 1 generic for a human soldier with reach, with 3 power and 1 toughness. Not for Standard, maybe fine for limited. Seems like a good aggressive 2-drop. Next is Sardian Cliff Stomper. 1 red, 1 generic for a 0/4 Minotaur Barbarian. As long as it's your turn and you control 4 or more mountains, it gets +X/+0, where X is the number of mountains you control. So if you play this on curve, you play it on turn 2, it's a 0/4 blocker. Until turn 3, you play another mountain, it's still a 0/4 blocker. And on turn 4, since you control 4 or more mountains, if you're playing mono red, it finally gets to attack as a 4/4. You've only invested 2 mana into this, but this card seems kind of like it's bait for cut down, and they have 2 or 3 turns to remove it. It's going to be pretty immune to burn-based removal, but by the time it gets big, they're going to probably have an answer to it. That being said, you only spent 2 mana on it, so if it does survive, it's going to be, a big beater by turn 5 or 6, swinging in for 5 or 6 if you hit every land drop. It seems like there's a lot of things that could go wrong with this card. It's a cool design, but I doubt that it really sees play. Next is Sibling Rivalry. 1 red, 3 generic for sorcery. Gain control of target artifact or creature until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. Create a tapped Power Stone token. If there are a lot of sacrifice outlets in black, this should see play. Stealing a creature, sacrificing it is always an awesome play. If not, I doubt that it really does. You need to be able to sacrifice this creature so they don't get it back. This pairs well with Pyrrhic Blast, but you'll need 8 mana to do this combo and both these cards in your hand on 1 turn, which seems pretty unlikely. This is going to be used when you have something that you can sacrifice a creature and get a benefit off of it. Could be used in Oni Cult Anvil decks, a sideboard tech against big things. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's enough sacrifice in here for this. Next is Tomical Scrapsmith. 1 red, 2 generic for a human artificer at 2/1 power and toughness. When this enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put an artifact card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on the Scrapsmith. Worst case scenario, it is a 3-drop, mill 3 cards, 3/2. Best case, you get to grab an artifact or have an artifact to unearth if you build your deck around this. Could see some play if the unearth artifact-based deck really comes together and ends up being good. This is going to depend on you having good artifacts in your deck. If you don't, this is just a 3/2 for 3, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's far from being at a power level where that's what we want to be casting on turn 3 without any additional upside. Next is Tyrant of Kerr Ridges. 2 red, 4 generic for a 4/5 flying dragon. When it enters the battlefield, it does 4 damage to any target. It also has fire breathing. Good card that does have an immediate effect on the board in the form of 4 damage to the opponent's face or 4 damage to their big 4 toughness creature. And it has an upside. If uncontested, it can swing in for a lot. Being that it costs 6 to get out, if you pump all your mana into it next turn, it can swing for 10. So it has to be answered, otherwise it'll win some games. It's not going to be blocked very easily because it is flying. If you cast it on curve, it remains on the field, it's going to win you some games. It's a good card, should see some play. Here we have Unleash Shell. 2 red, 3 generic for an instant that deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker and 2 damage to that permanent's controller. This is very expensive removal. It's nice to see a 5 damage red spell, but I do not want to pay 5 for this, and I don't really care about the 2 damage to their face if it's already turn 5 and I'm playing this. Limited removal only, no standard play on this one. Next is Visions of Phyrexia. 2 red, 2 generic for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't play a card from exile this turn, create a tapped Power Stone token. This is not for mono red aggro. This strikes me as something in red-based control, possibly like Jeskai. If it's played and it sticks, it can generate value over time, but a little bit of value each turn. I'm not sure that the power level means that you play this over other more powerful 4-cost spells in Standard. I know that it's blue, but a card like Memory Deluge, if you're in Izzet colors, grabs you 2 cards of your choosing immediately from the 4 cards at the top of your deck, and they can flash back later and can be done at instant speed. I know it's a blue card, this is a red card. I understand that, but this doesn't seem powerful enough for mono red, unless we have a deck that's just like big red. And I'm not sure that you run this over other card draw spells, and I don't think you care about the Power Stone tokens that much. Visions of Phyrexia doesn't do enough when it comes down. Next is Whirling Strike. 1 red, 1 generic for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains First Strike and Trample till end of turn. This is a solid combat trick for limited, may even see some standard play. If you can get that Izzet Prowess deck going, First Strike and Trample and 2 power is great in trick form at instant speed for 2 mana. I really like this card. You pair it with Prowess. There aren't many creatures that don't die in combat to a, when you're attacking with a 2/2, a 5/3 First Strike Trample. Pretty good. I like Whirling Strike. Next is Blitz Automaton. 6/4 haste for 7 generic mana, or you get to pay 1 red and 2 generic for a prototype version as a 3/2 haste. This is a common, but we have seen 3/3 haste creatures be good, especially in the Goblin deck in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Standard. There was a Bugbear that was a 3/3 for 3, that it did some work. This is a 3/2 for 3, but it has the upside that you can pay 7 if you have that much mana and get a 6/4 haste. As far as commons go, I think this card's good just because of the versatility of having the dual casting costs, but I still don't think that you really want to be doing either for 7 mana or for 3. There's better cards in the format right now. It's okay. Next is Falaji Dragon Engine. 8 mana for a 5/5 flying with tap 2 generic mana. It gains +1/+0 till end of turn. You can prototype this for 3 mana, and it's a 1/3. Seems fine for limited, not for constructed. Power level is nowhere near where we want it to be. Next we have Heavyweight Demolisher. 7 mana for an 8/6 menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, tap Heavyweight Demolisher unless you pay 3. So we have sort of like a cumulative upkeep deal here. If you wanted to go to combat every turn, you're going to have to pay 3. You can use Power Stone tokens to pay for that, so you can minimize that cost a little bit there. You can unearth this for 8. I think ultimately this is way too slow. This would be cool and limited if you have 3 or 4 Power Stones off of some of the spells that generate them, and then slamming this thing on turn 5 and then having the mana to untap it. It's pretty cool, but I don't see this seeing play in constructed unless Power Stones actually end up being insane and you just want all the artifacts you can get. Next is Mishra's Juggernaut. 5 mana for a 5/3 trample that attacks each combat if able. Not bad. We kind of want that to be the case in red, so it's not a huge downside. The 3 toughness means it kind of gets killed pretty easily. You can unearth it for 1 red and 5 generic. Not going to be good enough, but an interesting card for sure. Third to the last card, Mishra's Research Desk. 1 mana for an artifact. Pay 1 mana, sacrifice it, exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one. Until the end of your next turn, you may play it. Unearth for 1 red and 1 generic. This fits right in with the artifact sacrifice decks. and should see some play if those decks end up being good. Getting a payoff for sacrificing this artifact and also getting a card to play will be cool. And I really like Mishra's research desk, and I'm going to try it in Oni Cult Anvil. I think it's going to be good. Second to last card here, Scrapwork Mutt. 2 generic. When it comes into play, you may discard a card. If you do, you draw one, which is actually quite a bit worse than getting to draw the card first and then choosing what to discard. You have to discard one first, then draw. It's a 2/1 for 2. It has Unearth for 2. Not really seeing it for standard competitive play. Not fast enough, not impactful. And finally, we have Skitterbeam Battalion, ending on a Mythic here. 9 mana for a Mythic Rare Artifact, 4/4 Trample Haste. When it enters, if you cast it, create 2 copies of it. Prototype it for 5, meaning you'll instead get 3 2/2s with haste for 5 mana. I think this could see some play. I'm just not sure which deck can take advantage of it, of both the prototype and the full cost. 9 is reserved basically for control deck territory. Mono red doesn't want this at 9. My guess, if it's in like a red-based control deck, something with Jeskai or whatever, the 9 mana generic up top is nice. But maybe the prototype version, if you draw it early, provides you with some chump blockers till you stabilize the board, and then you're able to draw another one later and then have some big creatures that swing in with haste and end the game. So that's going to wrap it up for this video on the Brothers War set review for the color of red. If you like the video, you gain something from it, please consider hitting that thumbs up for me. Really helps the channel. Helps me to bring the content to more people and make more videos. If you disagree with something that I said, that is totally, absolutely fine. Leave a comment below. I'll get back to you. I'd like to discuss it. If I missed something, that'll be useful for me whenever I go in and start streaming on day 1 of release for the Brothers War and making videos for the channel. So thank you very much. Until next time, good luck in the arena and good luck in Magic the Gathering.